I wanted a place for people to receive authentic guidance and practical ways to awaken. Thought-provoking, paradigm-shifting, and empowering. This is about expanding our human consciousness to create a wave of new possibilities. I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke, and this is Quantum Minds TV. Welcome back to Quantum Minds TV, where we take a deep dive into various perspectives on what it's going to take to create a shift in human consciousness. In this episode, we're continuing the conversation with Steve Rees, who is a sound healer, musician, and researcher into healing frequencies. So how do you see music and especially healing music tuned into the right frequencies as playing a role with the process of shifting human consciousness?
Well, the first thing is that a lot of our consciousness is not, we don't allow because of our distractions. Mm-hmm. And so if we can remove our distractions or minimize them, it definitely is going to help us in our consciousness and what we're perceiving. I remember when I was taking my nursing class, one of the examples teacher had was as we get more uptight and worried about things, our focus actually narrows down. And she said she was at the Phoenix airport one time and she was missing a flight and she was getting all anxious and just really upset. And she said she was so upset she missed, at the time there were in the carpet, there were these big peacocks woven into the carpet. And she said she never even saw the peacocks and somebody had asked her if she saw them when she got home. And she said, no, I didn't see anything, because she was her field of vision was so closed in. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the things that the music can really help us do, is to help us take that anxiety away and allow us to be relaxed and allow us to sit back and take that deep breath, and then we can start to see so much more. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's a great example of what happens when somebody's, the system kicks into fight, flight, freeze, and the old brain then, kind of hijacks, and the ego, goes into its fear response, and we get that tunnel vision, and you can't actually perceive the fullness of your environment. Exactly. Because you're narrowing in for focusing on the threat, versus the wholeness of what's going on. So as we listen to music as one way to help us calm down, open up our senses and our more peripheral experience and sensory intake of the environment, and it also calms us down very quickly. I think music is a great tool because it's so fast through that principle of entrainment and re-harmonizing us.
There's another thing that I think is unique about what I'm doing with the Psalms, because a lot of times I've done a concert, and before I start to play a psalm, I'll have people turn to read that psalm while I'm playing it. Mm. And I get so many comments from people that it's like, one guy said, it's like the words were flying past me, because it's kind of like a multimedia. A friend of mine teaches English as a second language, and she said if they have the word apple on a page, there's 1%, there's a certain percentage of retention for that word. If they have them hold the apple and look at the word, it doubles the retention. Mm-hmm. If they have them take a bite out of the apple, it doubles that retention again. So they now have 3 different levels of intake on that same thing. And so I think similar thing is happening here. So that, especially with the Psalms, they're so encouraging and so people relate to them so well because they mirror their own experiences. And so when you can put the words of those Psalms right next to the music of those Psalms, there's a whole nother level of intake that takes place.
Mm. Well, and they're probably hearing them in the way they were originally intended, which
I
is
hope so.
with music, right? With that as a song, not just written or spoken
Right.
in sort of language like daily communication, but through music. And so much in the ancient world, so much of the wisdom teachings were delivered through song and through
Musically.
music.
Yeah.
The bards, right, are a great example. The
Absolutely.
troubadours are
Yeah.
another example. And it's because, and this is something that my mom, I actually grew up with this because my mom really had a passion for helping her students. She was a professor at a community college, and she had a passion for helping her students learn faster, get access more super learning states and smarter versus having to study harder, study smarter. And one of the keys to that was music. And, she worked with, for example, after reading about the Mozart effect, where when, people were doing a test and they were listening to Mozart and D concerto,
Right.
and then it raised their IQ 9 points. And then there's also, we all have the experience of, you have those memories of a certain event, for example, maybe your first dance in, as a kid and with someone you were kind of in love with or thinking you were in love with, and you're having that first dance and you remember the song. And as soon as like in your adult years, you hear that song come on again, it re-invokes the same feelings, the memory, the even, the other senses that were involved. So what goes in with music comes out with music.
Right.
And so this is a great way for the wisdom teachings, for example, to be delivered was with music so that people would more likely remember it as they remember the melody.
Yeah. We were in Israel several years back and visiting a community there that had a yeshiva in it for this young kids. And they were doing their scripture reading to music. They were singing asked the teacher why they were doing it. And he said, "Oh, we always do this. That's how they learn better. If they do it to music, they will remember the lesson. If they just read it, they won't remember the lesson." So I thought that was just like, oh wow, I didn't know that. But then I remembered A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Exactly. I was just about to say it's the same principle as when we learn our ABCs, right?
Yeah, right.
With the melodies so that we could remember it.
Yeah.
And we always remember those jingles, that they used in commercials and stuff, for example.
And there's got to be a reason why they do that.
Oh yeah, they want us to remember it.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to tuning scales, I want to just see if you have a comment on this, because there have been different people, and some of it's a bit of conspiracy theory stuff that's out there around the tuning scales and why the standardized tuning scale became like a 440 instead of a 444 or 432. And, from some of the research I've done, it wasn't necessarily any conspiracy necessarily as much as there was just so much difference at that time, and that they needed to standardize, and they just standardized to something that was a consensus, but it wasn't necessarily a significant scale that they standardized to.
Yeah, I've heard Hitler did this and Rockefellers did this, and I've heard a bunch of different theories or anyway. I don't think it was as malicious as that. I think it was more of a, like you say, a standardization. Everybody figured, if I'm going to be living in Iowa and I'm going to go play in an orchestra in New York, I need to be able to tune to the same way they're tuning. And I think that's really how a lot of it came to be. At the same time, I do think it's important to pay attention. It's interesting. I was reading an article not long ago that the Boston Pops Orchestra is now tuning to 444. And then I forget what the other orchestra was, they're tuning to 442. And so it's interesting how we're starting to get these little changes according to what the conductor's flavor is, I guess, And then I know several different music groups that have gone to the 444 just because they're getting a better, they just sense that it does better for them. And I've done testing with people to do the standard 440 versus the 444. And interestingly enough, enough of them, some of them not even musical, will almost always pick the 444 over the 440. There's something, I think it's at a DNA level, that there's something, even if we don't understand it, we gravitate towards it.
Yeah, I've heard this from other musicians as well, that it, it's more naturally resonant within, maybe whether it's at a soul level or at a physical DNA level. There's just something about the 444 and the 432 that just more naturally feels right when they're somewhat musically aware, and even if they aren't, it's just an intuitive. So it's possible that, historically speaking, when we came to this standardization of 440, it's possible that it was an unconscious dissonance, because it's very, you just look at the history of humanity and you can see many examples of where we have fallen out of alignment. We fall out of alignment with nature and the divine, and we get dissonant or even contrary to it. So it could have just been an unconscious thing.
Well, and think of the law of entropy, the law towards disorder. The longer you leave something unattended, the more disorderly it's going to become. And I think maybe that happens musically as well. It's interesting. Another reason for talking about the Solfeggio frequencies and kind of relabeling them tabernacle frequency, because of where they come out of Numbers chapter 7 in the scriptures. When I took the name of God, Yod He Vav He, in the Hebrew alphabet, that actually works out to be the C major chord, which is the 528.
Wow, I love that.
So in calling it the miracle frequency, maybe we could even call it the creator's frequency, or the creative frequency. Maybe that's why our bodies resonate towards that, because that's where we started. And maybe it's time that we get tuned up again.
That's amazing, Steve, because in the Kabbalistic tradition, the Yod He Vav He can also be aligned vertically, and they often call it Ezekiel's fiery man, which is a representation of what we humans are supposed to become, that Adam Kadmon, or the perfected human, that divine human. And also you can align that vertically with the tree of life. And the tree of life is said to be the sacred geometry that our DNA is built around. So it's the actual structure of the DNA. So if the Yod He Vav He adds to the 528, then you can relate that to the tree of life and to the DNA sacred geometrically as well.
We'd now like you to enjoy a short consciousness break in the quantum gap with some healing harp music by Steve Rees.
speaking, once again, if we follow the account of Genesis, the first few chapters, where we have Adam and Eve in this garden in this perfect state before a fall, there are many believe, and I'm just going to throw this in there, can edit again, but it says after they fell that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh made skins for them. Well, maybe they were the fiery man and woman before the fall, and maybe they had to come out of that state to where we are today, and maybe our design is to get back to that state.
Exactly, and these are the skins, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
exactly.
I just think that first of all, once again, I think evolution has done us a great disservice, because I think we've actually fallen and we're going to be restored. So yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we teach very much in the mystery school tradition that I teach with and have studied with for 20 years. And it very much connects into some of the Kabbalistic teachings, but also Hermetic teachings and other, even ancient Egyptian teachings. But they all ultimately coincide. And they say that in the beginning, we were in a divine state, that we were perfect, that we were made in that image of the divine, meaning we are not just a child of God, but we are God-like in our own nature and essence.
His image.
And and our lineage. And we then, for whatever reason, there's many interpretations of why, but we then fell. And we're on a journey of trying to reclaim. And in the Kabbalistic system, they say that our whole purpose for being here is to rectify this situation, to repair the shattered vessel of our own souls, and to heal that so that we can reclaim that divine state. But as we do, we went from a place of already being perfect to then going on this journey of imperfection to then reclaim perfection, but doing so by our own will and effort, and having to go through, in a way, an alchemical process where we really then, as we regain that state of that perfected human, like we become the philosopher's stone, and the philosopher's stone is then more indestructible, unable to fall, because we've earned that state then versus just being made into that state.
And then I take a slightly different journey in that I see the God-man Jesus, Yeshua, coming into our existence to give us the assistance to do that, so that we actually get some help in this thing. We're not just stuck on our own. And why does he do that? Well, because he created us and he wants to restore us, so he wants us back where he designed us to be. And I don't see those two visions very separate from each other. It's just, a lot of it's verbiage and how we state it, but in the end of the day, I think we're both saying the same thing.
And we definitely teach some of the role of Jesus as well, and very critical, to help show that way back to how we reclaim that state. And I think though that the music piece of this comes back in when it comes to that whole purpose, that whole journey of healing, to rise up, to maybe ascend. That healing process needs to happen through creating greater harmony within ourselves again, through creating that resonant state that can amplify and help us take those leaps in consciousness. And music can be very much a healing tool to support us. And, we're going to be exposed to frequencies one way or another. So if we want to be on a conscious journey of evolution, then, or transformation, I should say, then we should really be using this as a tool that can help create those harmonic and harmonious states within ourselves and within our environment, versus just leaving it to whatever the modern world exposes us to.
Yeah, that's one of the things Leonard talked about in his book on the healing codes. Um, he talked about so much of the pathogens actually being priogen, pyron, how do you say it? Prions, which are actually crystals, crystal formations.
Mm.
And so I remember when I was a kid, we made little crystal radio. I could listen to my baseball games when I was supposed to be sleeping because it was a little earpiece, but a crystal was enough to pull in the radio signal, the frequency, and then amplified enough to hear it. And he was making the statement, and I began to see how the music was so much an important part of it, because if we have the wrong frequency, and there are destructive frequencies, by the way,
Yeah.
if that's being amplified by these prions in our brains or whatever they're ending up in our bodies, then that's going to be a problem. That's disease. If we use music to take those same prions that was meant for harm, we got to the story of Joseph in the Bible. He says, his brothers sold him, and he thought that they thought he was going to be mad at him. But he said, no, what you meant for harm, God made good out of. And so we can do the same thing. We can, what is possibly harmful to us as far as prions and such that are ending up in through however they get here, and there's a whole bunch of theories about that. But if we can take positive frequencies to be amplified through our bodies, as you talked about the organs with the different one and all the rest, well, then we are defeating what harm is being designed, and we're turning it around for good. And so that's another way I see as music, especially the right frequencies, helping us in this journey that we're on to restore the way we were talking. So.
Yeah, so I think that goes both ways. Every negative can be redirected and used to create a positive, but also positives can be redirected and used to create negatives. And this is where you have a lot of things in the world that have been created with initially good intention and good purpose and good application, and then later down the line became manipulated and abused to control people, for example.
Right. Yeah.
But we are the ones who determine which way we use these tools. Any tool is in the hands of the beholder, the person who, is taking that tool into their hands. And just like a hammer, we can use it to build something up, or we can use it to break something down. We choose how we do it. So it's not the tool that's the problem, it's the people.
Yeah.
How they're choosing to use it. So we want to be using these and encouraging people to use these in a way that is to build up, to bring light, to bring healing, to bring that positive energy in.
It's interesting too, in Second Chronicles, I think, it says David, when he was king, he set up different courses of priests that had different functions. There was a chorus or singers. There were those who played cymbals, shofars, flutes. And then he set up a course and the wording is very interesting there. He says to prophesy on the harp. Now, if you think about what the word prophesy means, it's not just play it. Usually when you say somebody's a prophet, they have special knowledge that's coming to them either from God or from whatever, from knowledge sources or whatever, that the average person isn't receiving, that they are, and they share it to enlighten. Okay, well, why would David say he set up harpists to prophesy on the harp unless there was something taking place? So that's another reason why I see the harp as a very unique instrument. So I think it actually possibly has somehow this ability to bring a higher level of knowledge, or I'm not sure how to say that, but there's something that goes on with that. And I think when you're combining it with the Psalms and with this whole understanding of the connection, I think there's just a whole lot going on there that even I don't understand yet.
Well, I mean, you can think of, on one hand, that music can really help to create an altered state of consciousness. So they
Right.
could be using the music to help shift that consciousness into a state where they can be more connected to receive that, divine inspiration. But then I would imagine also that, and you may have this experience because you're more the musician than I am, but in the act of playing, and there's not just the hearing, there's the tactile aspect to it, and that ability to maybe really lose yourself into the music and the playing of it, and that could create a trance-like state as well. And then when you combine the music with the sacred words from the sacred text, or the words that are divinely inspired, and you bring those two together, it's food for the soul to help us to awaken at higher and higher levels.
Yeah. Even in my nurses training, we always talk about, we don't just treat the body, but we also treat the mind and the spirit. There's these three entities that they're interconnected.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the music hits us at all of those levels, I think, in one way or another.
Join us again as we continue to dive deeper into this fascinating conversation with Steve Rees on all things healing music and sound in the next episode.
This conscious conversation was created, produced, and recorded by Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke in collaboration with Steve Rees and edited by HH Films and Photo. The theme music was created by Tim Mountain of Even Load Productions. Quantum Minds TV is a product of the Quantum Learning Academy.